Everyone laughed at him when he walked in. But one act of kindness turned a struggling waitress's life upside down and revealed a billionaire in disguise. The diner buzzed with chatter, plates clinking, and the smell of fried bacon drifting through the air. Lena moved quickly between the tables, her ponytail swinging as she carried 2 plates in one hand and balanced a tray of coffee cups in the other. Her feet ached. Her apron was splattered with grease, but she smiled anyway. She always smiled, even when she was exhausted. It was Friday night, the busiest night of the week. The same group of regulars sat in the corner booth, laughing too loudly, teasing her whenever she passed by. They liked her in a way, but they also loved making jokes at her expense. "Hey Lena, smile a little more. Maybe you'll get a bigger tip," one of them said. She just laughed it off, though her cheeks burned. She needed this job. The rent was late again, and her younger brother, Danny, was starting a new semester soon. She couldn't afford to lose even one shift. The diner door chimed as someone walked in. Lena turned, expecting another local face, but instead she saw a man she'd never seen before. He looked like he had been walking for miles, his jeans dusty, jacket worn, shoes scuffed. He carried a small duffel bag and kept his head low. For a second, the place grew quiet and everyone stared. Then came the whispers. "Who's that?" someone muttered. "Probably another drifter," another said, snickering. Lena frowned, but forced a smile and walked over. "Evening, sir. You can sit anywhere you like." The man hesitated, his eyes tired but kind. He chose a small table by the window and placed the bag beside him carefully, like it was the only thing he owned. Lena handed him a menu, though he didn't open it. He just looked at her and said softly, "Can I just get a cup of coffee, please?" "Sure thing," she said cheerfully. "You want cream or sugar?" He smiled faintly. "Black's fine." When she brought him the coffee, she noticed him checking his pockets, counting a few crumpled bills. There wasn't much. He looked embarrassed, like he wanted to disappear. The group in the corner noticed too. One of them laughed and said loudly, "Hope he can afford that coffee, Lena. I'll let him run off without paying." The others burst into laughter. Lena's stomach tightened. She turned to the man and quietly said, "Don't worry about it. This one's on me." His eyes lifted in surprise. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied gently, "but I want to." He studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Thank you," he said. His voice steady, but filled with something heavy, something that felt like pain. Lena smiled and walked away, pretending not to hear the jokes being whispered behind her. "She's buying coffee for the homeless now," one of them sneered. "Maybe he'll pay her back with good karma." More laughter. She ignored it. People could be cruel, but she had learned that being kind didn't cost much. Besides, something about the man felt different. He didn't beg, didn't ask for pity, just sat there quietly, sipping his coffee, lost in thought. As the night went on, the diner emptied. The man stayed until closing time, thanking her once more before leaving. When he stepped outside, Lena saw him stop and look up at the night sky. For a moment, under the flickering diner sign, he didn't look poor at all. There was something strong about him, calm, like he knew more than he let on. The next morning, Lena returned for the breakfast shift. The owner, Mrs. Miller, gave her a tired smile. "You've got a good heart, Lena," she said softly. "Just be careful. Not everyone deserves it." Lena nodded but didn't say anything. She couldn't stop thinking about that man. By noon, the diner was full again. And then, to her surprise, the door chimed, and there he was. The same man, same bag, but this time with a small, shy smile. Lena greeted him warmly. "Good to see you again," she said. "You too," he said. "If it's not too much trouble, could I get some breakfast today? I think I can afford it." "Of course," she said, handing him a menu. "Don't worry about the trouble." The regulars in the corner noticed him immediately. One whispered, "Oh great, he's back." Another laughed. "Careful, Lena, your boyfriend's here." She felt her face flush but ignored them. She brought him pancakes and eggs, and when she set the plate down, he looked up at her and said, "You work hard." "Yeah," she chuckled, something like that. "You must really like people." "Most days," she said with a grin, some more than others. He smiled at that and began eating slowly, as though savoring every bite. After a while, he asked, "You live around here?" "Yeah," she said, leaning on the counter. "It's a small town. Been here all my life." "You have family?" "My brother. He's 17. I'm trying to help him finish school. Our parents passed away a few years ago, so—" She trailed off. He nodded, listening carefully. "That's a lot for one person to handle." "It is," she admitted, "but he's a good kid. I just want him to have a better life." The group in the corner started laughing again. One of them called out, "Hey, Lena, you giving your life story to the hobo now?" She turned away, her jaw tightening. But before she could say anything, the man looked at them calmly and said, "It's all right, they don't understand." Something in his voice made them go quiet, not angry, just steady, firm, the kind of tone that didn't need to shout to be heard. When he finished his meal, he reached for his wallet and paid carefully. "Thank you for treating me like a person," he said quietly. "Most people don't," Lena smiled, though her heart ached a little. "Everyone deserves kindness," she said. He studied her again with those thoughtful eyes, then said something that stuck in her mind long after he left. "You have no idea how rare kindness like yours is." She laughed softly. "I don't think so. The world just needs more of it." He gave a small smile. "Maybe you're right." Then he left, walking slowly down the street until he disappeared around the corner that night. She wiped down tables and counted tips. Lena kept thinking about that stranger. Something about him she couldn't shake. Not pity, not curiosity, but a quiet feeling that she had just met someone important, someone whose story wasn't what it seemed. The laughter from the regulars still echoed in her mind, but she didn't let it bother her. They could laugh all they wanted. She knew what it felt like to be judged, to be looked down on. Maybe that's why she always tried to lift others up. As she turned off the lights and locked the diner door, she looked out into the street where the man had walked earlier. The night was calm, the sky dark and wide. She whispered softly to herself, "I hope you're okay, whoever you are." Somewhere, not too far away, that same man was sitting in a quiet motel room, looking out his own window, thinking about the kind waitress who had treated him like a human being when no one else did. He smiled faintly to himself, and under his breath he said, "She's the one." The morning started quietly at the diner, sunlight spilling through the windows and the smell of coffee filling the air. Lena had just begun her shift when the doorbell jingled. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron, and her heart lifted a little when she saw the same man from before walking in. He looked a bit more rested, though still wearing the same old jacket and jeans. He gave her a small, almost shy smile, and she smiled back without hesitation. "You came back," she said, walking over. "I told you the coffee was good," he replied softly. She laughed, guiding him to the same seat by the window. The few morning customers barely looked up at first, but soon whispers started again. Some of the regulars nudged each other, grinning. One muttered, "Looks like Lena's got herself a project." Another chuckled. "Maybe she's starting a soup kitchen right here in the diner." Lena tried to ignore them, pretending she didn't hear, but she felt her stomach tighten. The man noticed the murmurs and glanced up, his expression calm but distant. He didn't seem angry, just used to it, like he'd heard that kind of talk all his life. "What can I get you today?" Lena asked quickly, trying to change the mood. He looked at the menu for a few seconds and said, "Maybe some pancakes? It's been a while since I've had those." "You got it?" she said, scribbling the order and rushing off to the kitchen. When she came back with his plate, he smiled, the smell of warm pancakes making his eyes light up a little. He took a slow bite and sighed, almost as if he was remembering something. "These are good," he said. "Tastes like the kind I used to have when I was younger." Lena smiled. "Food always brings memories back, doesn't it?" He nodded. "Yeah, it does." As he ate, he asked her questions. Not nosy ones, just gentle things about her life. She told him about growing up in town, how she'd worked at the diner since she was 16, and how she was raising her younger brother, Danny. She didn't mention money or struggle, but somehow he understood without her saying much. "Your brother's lucky to have you," he said quietly. "I don't know about that," she said, half laughing. Some days I'm so tired I can't even cook dinner. But you still try, he said. That's what matters. The regulars in the corner were watching them closely now. One of them whispered something and burst out laughing. Hey, Lena, he called out. You charging that guy full price or giving him the pretty waitress discount? The group erupted in laughter. Lena's face turned red. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the man set his fork down and looked straight at the group. He didn't raise his voice, but there was something sharp in his tone. You know, he said evenly, some people laugh too easily. Maybe it's because they've never had anyone treat them kindly. The table went quiet for a moment. Then one of the men muttered, Relax, buddy. We're just joking. Jokes are supposed to be funny, he said calmly. That wasn't. The air grew awkward. Lena felt her heart beating fast, both embarrassed and strangely proud. The man turned back to his plate as if nothing had happened. Lena walked over to refill his coffee, trying to lighten the moment. I'm sorry, she said softly. They can be childish. He smiled faintly. You don't have to apologize for other people's manners. She laughed a little. Still, I feel bad. He looked at her carefully. You shouldn't. You've already done more than enough. After a while, the diner quieted down again. The lunch crowd came and went. The man sat there for nearly an hour, sipping his coffee slowly, lost in thought. When he finally stood up, placed a few bills on the table, more than enough to cover the meal. Double quotes, "Thank you for breakfast," he said. "And for not caring about how I look." Oh. She smiled. You're welcome. It's just breakfast. Maybe to you, he said softly, but not to me. Before leaving, he hesitated near the door, like he wanted to say something else. Then he turned back and asked, Can I ask you one thing? Sure, she said. If you could do anything in the world, anything at all, what would it be? The question caught her off guard. She paused, thinking. I'd probably open my own cafe, she said finally. Nothing fancy. Just a small place with good coffee, homemade pies, and maybe a jukebox that plays old songs. Somewhere, people can feel at home, he smiled, eyes crinkling slightly. Sounds perfect, she said, a little embarrassed. It's just a dream, though. I can barely afford rent. He studied her face for a moment. Dreams start small, he said quietly. Kindness does too. Then he picked up his bag and walked out. For a long moment, Lena just stood there, watching through the window as he crossed the street and disappeared around the corner again. The regulars had gone back to their food, acting like nothing had happened, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just taken place. That night, after closing, she sat alone at one of the booths, counting her tips. The numbers barely added up to what she needed. Rent was due in 2 days, and Danny had a school trip she couldn't afford. She sighed, rubbing her temples. She thought of the stranger's words, dreams start small. She wondered who he really was. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, that didn't fit with his worn clothes. He didn't seem desperate or lost. He seemed calm, like a man who had already lived through many things and didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Outside, a rain began to fall, tapping softly on the diner windows. Lena wiped down the counters slowly, replaying their conversation in her head. The sound of his voice lingered, deep and steady. She smiled to herself, not knowing why. Maybe it was just nice to meet someone who listened. Before she left, she checked under the table where he'd been sitting. Her eyes widened. Tucked beneath the sugar jar was a folded napkin. On it, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for your kindness. You'll see it again someday." She stared at it for a long time, unsure what it meant. It wasn't a joke. It didn't sound like something a stranger would just write. Like a promise, Lena folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket. As she stepped outside, the rain hit her face, cool and refreshing. She locked the door and looked down the street, wondering if she'd ever see him again. Somehow, she knew she would. The day started like any other. The diner was busy, the same smell of fresh coffee and frying bacon filling the air. Lena was refilling sugar jars and greeting customers with her usual smile. She was tired but cheerful, trying not to think about bills or the rent notice waiting at home. It was just another afternoon till everything changed. It began with the sound of a car engine outside, deep and smooth, not the usual truck or pickup that passed through their small town. The noise made a few people glance toward the window. Then the diner door opened, and a rush of cold air swept in. A tall man in a black suit stepped inside, followed by another, then another. They looked serious, like bodyguards scanning the room carefully. The place fell silent. Even the cook peeked out from the kitchen. Then, behind them, a man everyone recognized walked in, the billionaire. Known from TV and magazines, the owner of one of the biggest hotel chains in the country, people froze. The chatter stopped completely. Someone dropped a spoon. Lena stared, her heart racing. What was a man like that doing here in their tiny diner? The regulars straightened up in their seats, whispering in shock. The billionaire didn't look around much. He walked in calmly, almost like he had been there before, and his eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. For a strange moment, it felt like he was looking directly at Lena. She blinked, unsure what to do. Then, just as everyone's eyes followed the billionaire, the door opened again, and in walked the man from before. The one who had come in with the old jacket, the one everyone had laughed at. But now, he looked completely different. He was clean-shaven, his hair neat, wearing a simple but elegant suit. It was still him, the same eyes, the same quiet smile, but he looked like another person. The diner filled with gasps. The billionaire turned toward him immediately, and to everyone's shock, walked right up to him. The two shook hands like old friends. "Sir," the billionaire said respectfully, "the car is ready whenever you are." The whole diner went dead silent. Forks stopped midair. One of the regulars nearly choked on his food. Everyone looked from the billionaire to the man they had mocked just days ago, trying to understand what they were seeing. Lena's mouth fell open slightly, but she didn't say a word. The man, the one who had quietly drunk his coffee and eaten her pancakes, smiled and looked around the diner. His eyes were calm, but there was something different in them now. Confidence, power, the kind of presence that made people go quiet without a single word. "Thank you, Michael," he said to the billionaire. "I'll be with you in a moment." The billionaire nodded and stepped aside respectfully. Respectfully, to the man everyone had thought was poor, Lena felt her hands tremble slightly as she wiped them on her apron. The regulars looked stunned. One whispered, "What the hell's going on?" Another muttered, "That can't be the same guy." "No way." The man turned his gaze toward Lena and smiled kindly, the same gentle smile she remembered. He walked up to the counter while everyone stared. "Good afternoon, Lena," he said softly. She swallowed hard. I don't understand," she said quietly. He chuckled a little. "I know. It's a surprise." You're with him?" she asked, nodding toward the billionaire still waiting near the door. The man smiled again, almost shyly. "Actually, he works for me." Her heart skipped a beat. "For you?" "Yes," he said. "My name isn't Tom, not really. I'm Thomas Graham. I own the Graham Group, restaurants, hotels, a few other things. But sometimes, I like to visit places like this, just to see how people treat others when they think no one's watching." The room filled with whispers. The same people who had laughed at him now looked pale. Some avoided his eyes completely. The diner owner came rushing out from the back, smiling nervously, saying, "Mr. Graham, such an honor. We didn't know if I'd known." He raised a hand gently. "Please don't. I preferred it that way." He turned back to Lena, his voice calm but full of warmth. "You didn't judge me. You treated me like a human being when everyone else laughed. I won't forget that." Lena stood there frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She didn't know what to say. "I was just doing my job," she murmured. "No," he said softly. "You were doing more than that. You were kind." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, placing it on the counter in front of her. "I meant what I said. Kindness like yours is rare." She looked down at the envelope, confused. "What's this?" "Something that might help you start that little cafe you told me about," he said. Her eyes widened. How did you—" He smiled gently. You told me about it, remember? Pancakes and coffee, jukebox, homemade pies. Her face turned red. I didn't think you were really listening. I was, he said simply. The regulars sat in stunned silence. One of them, the same man who had mocked him most, finally stood and stammered. We didn't mean anything by the jokes, sir. Just fooling around. Thomas turned his head slightly toward him, not angry, just calm. I know, he said, but maybe next time you'll think twice before laughing at someone for how they look. The man nodded quickly, unable to meet his eyes. Then Thomas looked back at Lena. You have a good heart, he said softly. Don't lose that, no matter where life takes you. Before she could speak, the billionaire stepped forward again. Sir, we should go. We have that meeting in the city. Thomas nodded. He smiled one last time at Lena. Take care of yourself. I'll be in touch. Then he walked out, the billionaire following behind him. The suited men holding the door open as they left. The moment the door closed, the diner erupted in shocked murmurs. Did you see that? He's a billionaire. I can't believe it, he was sitting right there. Lena just stood still, staring at the envelope in her hands. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside was a single folded note and a business card. The note read, For the woman who believes kindness still matters, call me when you're ready to start something new. Under it was a check, a real printed check with her name on it. The amount made her knees weak. It was enough to pay her rent for a year, and more than enough to open her cafe. Tears filled her eyes as she pressed the note to her chest. Around her, the regulars tried to speak, tried to apologize, but she barely heard them. All she could think about was that quiet man who had sat alone at her table, and how everything she believed about kindness, about people, had just been proven true in the most unbelievable way. As the limousine outside pulled away, Lena stood by the window, watching until it disappeared down the street. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel small or ordinary. She felt seen. She felt like her kindness had meant something after all. The diner felt different after that afternoon. The buzz of normal conversation returned, but Lena couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She still held the envelope in her hands, the note and the check tucked safely inside her apron pocket. She had never imagined that her small acts of kindness could lead to something so extraordinary. Every customer who came in seemed ordinary now, almost like they were shadows compared to what had just happened. The next morning, she arrived at the diner earlier than usual, her mind racing. She tried to act normal, smiling at the few early customers, but her thoughts kept returning to Thomas Graham. Who was he really? How had he noticed her? And why had he singled her out among everyone else? As she wiped the counters, she noticed the regulars from the corner booth looking at her differently now. There was no laughter, no teasing. Some tried to smile politely, but it was awkward. She realized that for once, they didn't know how to act around her. Not because she had changed, but because the man they had mocked had turned out to be someone they could hardly imagine. A few days later, Thomas returned. Lena froze when she saw him walk through the door. This time, he didn't carry a bag, and his suit was immaculate. He smiled gently at her and waved, and she felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Good morning, Lena, he said softly, his eyes warm. Good morning, Mr. Graham, she replied, trying to sound calm, even though her heart was racing. He sat at his usual table near the window, and she brought him coffee without a word. Something about the way he sat, confident yet unassuming, made everyone else in the diner give him space. The regulars whispered among themselves, their curiosity obvious but restrained. Thomas didn't eat much. Instead, he watched Lena quietly as she worked, moving from table to table with her usual grace and warmth. After a while, he called her over. You have a gift, he said. Most people see the world in black and white. They judge too quickly. But you see the person, not the appearance. That's rare. Lena shook her head, unsure how to respond. I'm just trying to do my best, she said softly. No, he said firmly. You do more than your best. You give people dignity. That's something most people never understand. He paused, looking around the diner. I come here not for the food, but to see humanity in action. I travel the world, meet thousands of people, and rarely find someone like you." Lena felt a lump in her throat. She had spent years working hard, doing her best to help others. And now, someone she had only met twice was telling her it mattered in a way she had never imagined. "Why me?" she asked, almost whispering. "Because you didn't see me as a test, a stranger, or a joke," he replied. "You treated me like a person. That's why I noticed you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table in front of her. Inside were documents detailing an offer she could never have imagined. He wanted her to manage a new restaurant he was opening, a small, cozy place that would be part of his chain, but with room for her ideas, her style, her touch. Lena's hands shook as she looked through the papers. She had dreamed of owning a cafe, of making her own place warm and welcoming. She had never thought it could actually happen. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Are you serious?" she asked. "I've never been more serious in my life," he said, smiling gently. "I want someone who understands people, who treats them with respect. I want you to help me create that kind of place." The regulars were watching quietly, unable to hide their astonishment. One of them muttered, "She deserves it." "I guess we were wrong." Thomas glanced at them and nodded slightly. "It's never too late to learn." Lena closed the folder, tears threatening to spill. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come with me," he said softly. "Say you'll take a chance on yourself." For a long moment, she didn't speak. She thought of Danny, of the struggles she had faced alone, and of the diner where she had worked for years. She thought about the kindness she had given without expecting anything in return. And now, this opportunity was real, tangible, and life-changing. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll do it." Thomas smiled, a calm, proud smile. "Good. I knew you'd see it as the right choice." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lena couldn't stop thinking about what this meant, not just for her, but for her brother, for the life she had dreamed of. The envelope, with the check, the note, and now this offer. Everything seemed like a dream. She looked around the diner one last time before leaving, realizing that this place, these people, had been a chapter of her life she would never forget. Thomas walked with her to the car, speaking quietly. "Remember, Lena, people will always try to judge you. Some will mock, some will doubt you, but don't let that stop you from being who you are. Your kindness, your heart, that's your true power." She nodded, listening carefully. "I won't forget," she said, as they drove toward the city. Lena stared out the window, thinking about how quickly life could change. One act of kindness, one small decision to treat a stranger with respect, had led to this moment. It was almost unbelievable, but she felt the truth of it deep in her heart. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope. Hope for her brother, hope for her future, and hope for a life where she could finally pursue her dreams. The city's skyline appeared in the distance, shining in the afternoon sun. It was bright, full of possibilities, and Lena felt ready to step into it. Over the next few days, Thomas guided her through the plans for the new restaurant. He wanted her input on everything: the menu, the decor, even the way the staff would be trained to treat customers. Lena felt a mix of excitement and nerves, but she also felt capable. She had been given a chance, not just because of luck, but because of the way she treated others, and that gave her confidence she had never had before. The regulars back at the diner watched from the windows as she left each morning for meetings in the city. Some waved, some whispered apologies, others just stared in awe. Lena didn't hold any anger toward them. Instead, she felt grateful for the lessons, the reminders that judgment and laughter can be cruel, and that kindness is always stronger than mockery. One evening, after a long day of planning, Thomas called her into his office. He handed her a small leather-bound notebook. "I want you to keep track of your ideas," he said. "Every thought, every suggestion, every dream. This is your restaurant as much as it is mine." Lena opened it carefully, feeling the weight of the opportunity in her hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Thomas smiled. "No, thank you. You've reminded me why I started this project in the first place, to find people like you. People who believe that kindness matters. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. I won't let you down. I know you won't, he said softly. That night, Lena lay in bed, exhausted but happy. She thought about the diner, about Danny, about the mysterious man who had walked in months ago, changing her life forever. She realized that dreams, no matter how small, could come true, especially when guided by kindness and courage. And somewhere in the city, Thomas Graham smiled as well, knowing that he had found someone remarkable, someone who would carry his vision forward with a heart as strong as hers. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the small, new restaurant, casting a warm glow across polished wooden tables and soft, inviting chairs. Lena stood behind the counter, her apron crisp and clean, taking a deep breath. She could hardly believe she was here, in her own space, finally. After years of working long shifts at the diner and dreaming about something more, every detail had her touch. From the shelves lined with colorful mugs to the chalkboard menu filled with her favorite dishes, her brother, Danny, was helping set up the tables, excitedly placing small flower vases on each one. His laughter echoed through the room, light and carefree, and Lena smiled, realizing how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks. Just a month ago, she had been struggling to pay rent, worrying about tuition and meals, and now she was here. Running a restaurant of her own with Thomas Graham's guidance and support, the first customers trickled in. Local families curious about the new place. Lena greeted each one warmly, remembering everything Thomas had taught her, how to make each person feel important, how to listen, how to notice little things about them that made their visits special. She moved from table to table with grace, helping Danny serve pancakes and coffee. The air was filled with chatter, laughter, and the delicious smell of freshly baked pastries. Even though she had achieved what she had dreamed of, Lena stayed humble. She made a point of checking on the staff, asking how they were doing, making sure everyone felt comfortable and respected. It was the same heart that had drawn her to help a stranger months ago in the diner, a heart that now guided her in this new life. Later that afternoon, a familiar limousine pulled up outside. Lena's heart skipped a beat when she recognized the sleek black car. She stepped outside to greet the passengers, and to her surprise, Thomas himself stepped out. He was wearing a casual jacket this time, smiling gently as he walked toward her. "Lena," he said warmly, "I wanted to see how everything was going. It's amazing," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I couldn't have done this without you." He shook his head, smiling. "No, you could have done it on your own eventually. I just helped a little. You had the vision and the heart. That's what matters." Thomas looked around the restaurant, noting the cheerful energy and the customers enjoying themselves. "You've created something special here," he said. "Not just a restaurant, but a place where people feel welcome. That's rare these days." Lena blushed slightly. "I hope people like it," she said. "I want everyone to feel at home, like it's their own place." "That's exactly why you'll succeed," he said, as they walked inside. Thomas noticed Danny running around helping customers. He chuckled. "And this little helper?" "My brother," Lena said proudly. "He's been helping me since day one. I wanted him to see that dreams can come true. And he will, because of you." For weeks, Thomas continued to visit, not as a billionaire checking in, but as a friend. He offered advice, shared ideas, and sometimes just sat quietly, watching Lena work. She noticed that he never tried to take over or overshadow her. Instead, he encouraged her to trust her instincts, to lead with kindness, and to believe in herself. One evening, as the sun set and the last customers left, Lena and Thomas sat together at a small table by the window. The restaurant was quiet now, soft music playing in the background. Lena looked at him thoughtfully. "I still can't believe it," she said. "Just a few months ago, I was serving pancakes to a man people laughed at, and now, this is my life." Thomas smiled gently. "Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest impact. You treated me with kindness when no one else would, and look at what it's led to." She laughed softly. "I never thought being kind could change my life." "It does," he said simply. "It changes everything for you and for everyone around you." Lena thought about the diner, about the regulars who had laughed at her and at him, and about how life had a strange way of rewarding those who stayed true to themselves. She realized that success wasn't about money or fame, but about the lives you touched and the hearts you lifted along the way. Over the next few months, the restaurant thrived. Lena expanded the menu, added a few more tables, and hired a small team who shared her vision of kindness and care. The customers returned regularly, drawn not just by the food, but by the warmth of the atmosphere Lena had created. Each morning, she would greet people with a smile, offer small gestures of care, ensure everyone felt welcome, just as she had treated Thomas months ago. Thomas occasionally stopped by, sometimes to offer guidance, sometimes just to enjoy a quiet meal. One afternoon, as they sat together sipping coffee, he said something that stayed with Lena forever. "You know, Lena," he said, "your kindness didn't just help me see the good in people. It reminded me why I do what I do. Money and power can do many things, but they can't buy heart. You have heart, and that makes all the difference." Lena smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I guess we both learned something then," she said. Her brother Danny, now confident and happy, has often helped in the restaurant, learning responsibility and the value of hard work. Lena watched him one day, setting plates carefully for customers, and felt a deep sense of pride, not just in her achievements, but in how far they had come together. Life was busy, but Lena found happiness in the simple moments: a smile from a satisfied customer, a kind word from a colleague, a quiet nod from Thomas across the room. She realized that success wasn't just measured by profits or recognition, but by the positive impact one could have on the people around them. Months passed, and Lena's restaurant became a beloved part of the community. People talked about it not just for the food, but for the warmth, respect, and kindness that seemed to radiate from every corner. Stories spread about the young woman who had started small but dreamed big, who had been given an incredible opportunity because she treated others with decency and care. And Thomas continued to visit, quietly observing, proud of what Lena had built. One evening, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon from a quiet corner of the restaurant, he said softly, "You've created something that will last far longer than I ever could. That's real success." Lena looked around, taking in the laughter, the smiles, the gentle clatter of dishes, and felt a deep sense of peace. She realized that life could change in an instant, that kindness had power, and that dreams, no matter how small, could come true if one stayed true to oneself. And as the last customers left that night and Lena locked the doors, she knew that this was only the beginning, a new chapter filled with hope, purpose, and the kind of happiness that comes from lifting others while pursuing your own dreams. She smiled softly, thinking of Thomas and the stranger he had once been, and whispered to herself, "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." Her life had transformed, not just through opportunity or luck, but because she had chosen to be kind when it mattered most. And in that kindness, she found a wealth far greater than money, a wealth of heart, respect, and a life that was truly hers.